The Final Bell, Hulk Hogan's Casket Procession and Farewell Tribute. On August 5, 2025, the world of professional wrestling said goodbye to one of its most iconic and polarizing figures, Hulk Hogan. Known to millions across generations for his electric charisma, signature red and yellow ring gear, and larger-than-life persona, Hogan's death marked the end of an era. Though his career had its fair share of controversies and comebacks, what remained undeniable was his lasting imprint on wrestling culture. The casket procession and funeral that followed were not just ceremonial events but symbolic closures to a story that shaped the very DNA of WWE and the sport's global expansion. A private farewell. The funeral took place in Largo, Florida, at Indian Rocks Baptist Church, the same church where Hogan had been baptized in 2023 after embracing a quieter, spiritual chapter in his later life. While his public persona was bold and theatrical, this final event was deliberately the opposite. It was private, tightly secured, and kept away from the roaring crowds that once chanted his name in packed arenas. Police officers, private security, and even K-9 units were stationed at the venue. Private event signs dotted the church property, and only a carefully selected list of family, friends, and longtime colleagues were granted access. For fans who had followed Hogan for decades, the lack of a public memorial might have seemed unusual, but those closest to the legend emphasized that this was exactly what he had requested. A peaceful goodbye, surrounded by love and sincerity, not fanfare. Symbolism in the casket procession. As Hogan's casket was carried into the church, the solemnity of the moment was underscored by thoughtful symbolism. 8 pallbearers, dressed uniformly in black suits, slowly processed into the church sanctuary. Each man wore a yellow boutonniere, a small yet poignant tribute to Hogan's trademark color scheme from his wrestling days. This was not just a style choice, it was a representation of the Hulkamania spirit. The red and yellow had come to define a movement in wrestling, one that blurred the lines between athleticism, entertainment, and cultural phenomenon. For fans of the 1980s and 1990s, those colors were instantly recognizable and emotionally charged. The pallbearers themselves were not simply there to carry a casket. They were longtime friends and peers, many of whom had shared rings, locker rooms, and personal milestones with Hogan over decades. Their steps were slow, heavy with memory and respect, not only for the man who lay in the casket but for the brotherhood they had built in a world unlike any other. A guest list of legends. While the ceremony was closed to the public, those in attendance formed a cross-section of Hogan's life-blending wrestling royalty, personal allies, and a few unexpected names. Among the wrestling elite were Triple H, Stephanie McMahon, and Vince McMahon, all of whom had been part of pivotal moments in Hogan's career. Legends like Kevin Nash, Sting, Eric Bischoff, Jimmy Hart, Lex Luger, Ted DiBiase, and Paul White paid their respects. These were not just industry figures, they were individuals who had shaped wrestling history with Hogan. Also present were Hogan's longtime friends from outside the squared circle. Kid Rock, who had shared the stage and cultural spotlight with him on numerous occasions, attended alongside comedian Theo Von and Bam Margera, whose irreverent style was once compared to wrestling's chaos. Their presence underscored Hogan's reach beyond wrestling. He was not just a WWE superstar, he was a pop culture icon. His ex-wife, Linda Hogan, was seen arriving discreetly, while his current wife, Sky Daly, and son, Nick Hogan, were active participants in the ceremony. Notably absent was his daughter, Brooke Hogan, who later released a public statement saying she had chosen to grieve privately and in peace, away from media and fanfare. A ceremony of reflection. The service was quiet, heartfelt, and filled with personal stories, less about fame and more about the man behind the handlebar mustache. A local pastor, who had baptized Hogan 2 years prior, led the service. He spoke not just of Hogan's fame but of his faith, his internal battles, and his desire for redemption. In his final years, Hogan had sought a more peaceful life, turning to prayer, family, and small acts of kindness. Wrestling, he had once said in an interview, gave him fame, but faith gave him meaning. A few of his closest friends spoke at the podium. Kevin Nash, visibly emotional, talked about their long friendship and the chaos of the road. Jimmy Hart, known as the Mouth of the South, recalled their time building promos together and the sheer joy of making audiences cheer, boo, and laugh. Eric Bischoff shared a more personal note about Hogan's transition from the New World Order villain to a man seeking quiet evenings with his grandchildren. There were no video montages, no highlight reels. Instead, a single acoustic rendition of Real American, the theme song synonymous with Hogan's heyday, played softly as the service closed. It was haunting and beautiful, a stripped-down tribute to a once larger-than-life character. Cremation and final rest. Following the service, Hogan's body was cremated at Sylvan Abbey Memorial Park and Funeral Home in Clearwater, Florida. The decision to cremate was one reportedly made by Hogan himself. Friends say he preferred the simplicity and the opportunity for family members to keep him close in their own way, perhaps in an urn at home, or scattered somewhere meaningful. It was in many ways consistent with the way he lived his final years. After a career that soared to the heights of superstardom, Hogan had sought stillness in later life. He opened up about injuries, health struggles, estranged relationships, and regrets. But he also focused on healing physically, emotionally, and spiritually. The cremation, like the service, mirrored that sense of closure, the end of an era. The casket procession of Hulk Hogan was more than just a ceremonial rite, it was the end of an era. For many, Hogan was the first wrestler they ever saw, the first action figure they owned, or the reason they first tuned in to Monday Night Raw. He was a hero, a villain, a meme, a comeback story, and a cautionary tale, all wrapped into one iconic figure. It's rare for a single individual to impact an entire sport in such profound ways. Hogan wasn't just a top draw. He helped transition wrestling from regional circuits to global television. His match against Andre the Giant at WrestleMania 3, the birth of the NWO and WCW, his return to WWE in the early 2000s, these moments didn't just entertain, they defined wrestling eras. To witness his casket being carried, to see old rivals and real-life friends reunited in grief, was to witness a moment that no video package could capture. This was real. This was final. This was goodbye. Public reaction. While the funeral was private, social media lit up with tributes as news of the ceremony spread. Wrestlers from every generation, The Rock, John Cena, Becky Lynch, Roman Reigns, and even current AEW stars, shared photos, memories, and heartfelt messages. Fans across the globe recreated classic Hulk Hogan promos, shared old VHS footage, and changed their profile pictures to the red and yellow lightning bolt logo that once symbolized wrestling's golden age. Even critics who had taken issue with Hogan's past controversies acknowledged his unparalleled influence. You can't talk about wrestling without talking about Hulk Hogan, one ESPN commentator said. He wasn't just the face of wrestling. For a time, he was wrestling. Legacy and layers. What does Hulk Hogan's casket procession ultimately represent? It is, of course, a farewell to a man, but also to a version of wrestling history now gone. Hogan's career stretched across territories, promotions, and eras. He witnessed and helped build wrestling's transformation from smoky bingo halls to global arenas, from pay-per-view to streaming. He was not without flaws, and his controversies remain part of his complex legacy. Yet even those who criticized him agree. The man changed the business. And on that day in Largo, as his casket was carried with care and reverence, there was no arena crowd, no pyrotechnics, no over-the-top entrance. Just family, friends, and those yellow roses saying goodbye to a man who once taught millions to say their prayers, eat their vitamins, and believe in the power of Hulkamania. Rest in peace, Hulk Hogan, 1953-2025. The ring is quiet now, but the echoes of "What You Gonna Do, Brother?" will linger forever.